Ginger Smith has worked as a record store employee, freelance writer, bookstore assistant manager, and high school teacher of English. In the past, she has played in many tabletop RPG games, groups, and even run several of her own. She collects vintage toys, SF novels, and comic books. Ginger, it is yours.
Hi, everybody. Tonight I'll be reading from my space opera, The Rush's Edge. This scene takes place right after Ty and Hal, two former soldiers and best friends, rescue a techer named Vivi from a kidnapping attempt in a bar. She eventually joins their crew. She had a headache, a bad one. Did Noah find me? The thought caused her to open one eye, expecting to see her small cube of a rented room, or worse, her hab unit with Noah. Instead, she saw a medical bay with metal floors and ceiling. Opening both eyes, she looked around. She was in a med bed, covered with a blanket. She could feel the pull of medical sensors on her arm and collarbone. Her fingers began to work at them in growing panic. Where the hell am I? She breathed, yanking harder at the sticky pads of the sensors. She had a vague memory of two men grabbing her and pulling her somewhere she did not want to go. Had she been taken prisoner? The room swam in her sight, and she squeezed her eyes shut tightly with a groan. You are on the low shod, Vivian Valjean. I am Runa, the ship's computerized assistant. Please do not try to get up. Her eyes opened wide. The calm, steady voice seemed to come from above her, where the ship's comms would be. If the ship's computer knew she was awake, it would be alerting someone right now. Yeah, well, sorry, I don't take orders from computers. I give the orders. She removed the last sticky pad from her collarbone. I'm out of here. Miss Valjean, you are suffering the after effects of being drugged. No shit, really? Vivi slid from the bed, promptly falling on the floor. On her hands and knees, she found her boots and sat back to jam her feet into them. It took a moment to regain her balance, and the sudden vertigo made her cling to the med bed until the world stopped spinning. What the hell happened to me? She asked, slurring her words. Lifting her head, she saw her bag. Her data pad and ID were on the counter next to it. She shoved them into the backpack, grabbed it, and lurched toward the door. As she got there, it slid open, and she ran into a man standing on the other side. She staggered back, then tripped and fell to the ground. Whoa there, he said. You shouldn't be up yet. She looked up at him through a haze. He was attractive, with short brownish blonde hair, gentle eyes, and a golden scruff on his face that softened his features. He knelt beside her, taking her arm gently. She could smell the clean scent of his soap. I need to get you back onto the bed, he said, helping her to a sitting position. I remember you, she said uncertainly. Was he the man who had grabbed her arm and tried to take her out of the bar? Or was he that blur of gray and black she'd seen fighting her would-be attacker? She wasn't sure. You were in the bar. Yeah, no need to be afraid. The man helped her to her feet. When she took a sliding step backwards to put space between them, he was careful not to touch her again. If you can just lie back down, we can talk, he gestured toward the bed. Even though it was the last thing she wanted to do, she felt nauseous, and lying down was probably a good idea. He followed her as she staggered her way to the med bed and crawled up on it. Nobody's going to hurt you here, Miss Valjean. Who are you? She asked before laying back down. My name's Hal Cullen, he replied. Should I get our medic? She squeezed her eyes shut. No, I'm just kind of dizzy. That normal, Rena? Yes, Hal, the computer's even tone replied, but I am not currently getting a reading on our guest. Here, let me reattach the monitors, Hal murmured, turning her arm to place the sensor inside her elbow. He was careful with her, moving slowly so as not to startle her. Did you guys kidnap me, Bibi said, clutching her backpack to her with one arm. No, Hal looked up startled. He shook his head as he moved to slip off her boots and cover her with a warm blanket again. No, there were guys in the club who tried to snatch you, but I saw it and came after you. She began to remember the blind man attacking the one who had yanked her up with a hand in her hair. Oh, right, Vivi nodded, her eyes growing heavy again. I kind of recall seeing you fighting with someone. Yeah, you're safe now. Our medic said you probably need to sleep a little longer. But I'm not sleepy. She lay there, feeling both nervous around this total stranger and more exhausted than she'd ever felt in her life. He took a seat beside the bed, and she forced her eyes to stay open, wanting to keep an eye on him. But within moments, she lost the battle. When Ty entered the common area later that night, he saw Hal at the table eating a protein bar and drinking a bottle of water, his standard fare after a rush or a night of drinking. He was reading something on his handheld, but glanced up when he saw Ty's. Barrel with our guest? Ty asked. Yeah. Ty raised an eyebrow. You good? 5 by 5, Cap. Ty was glad to see that Hal was back to a calmer state of mind. The rush had been a short one. Like all bats, Hal was subject to a stronger reaction to adrenaline than those born normally. Seeking the rush was built into his biology. Russian bats were at the top of their physical and mental prowess, but it took a great toll on them. Ty's regiment had been made up almost exclusively of bats, so he knew them well enough to help Hal manage the more aggressive facets of his nature. Bats were raised to serve in the military, so the rush compulsion wasn't a problem until they got their walking papers from the service. They were discharged from their military duty after 7 years. In the early days of the genetically modified soldiers, they tried to keep them enlisted indefinitely, but the nightly programming they underwent made them violent and unstable. Ivor Nash was the last bat to have served 8 years. He had been a model soldier up until he committed the mass murder of his brothers and commanding officers during his sleep cycle. Nash's mind had fractured from all the programming, and he'd moved like a one-man death machine wading through a sea of bodies. They had been helpless. The only one to survive was the highest-ranking Nat officer, to whom Nash proudly reported his victory over the enemy. The officer promptly shot Nash in the face. In his mind, Ty could still see the surveillance footage of the event he'd been forced to watch as part of his training, supposedly to show them what a bat was capable of. Ty had been just as shocked and saddened as his fellow officers, but he also knew there was a darker agenda at play. They'd been shown the video in order to sow fear and distrust of bats in the new officers, so that they would keep them on a short leash. According to the upper brass, Nash had simply malfunctioned. It showed Ty exactly how they thought of the men and women they sent out to put down uprisings and fight the pirates in the meat grinder of the edge. Equipment only. With adjustments in the cap spent on years in service, the government promised that the problems with the bats were dealt with, safe, effective, and ready to serve. Some of the officers stayed distrustful of the bats under their command, but Ty had never been that way, especially not with Hal. After serving alongside each other in the ACAS, it had been natural that they stay together. Ty got used to looking after Hal. Knowing the trouble bats could get into on their own, he felt responsible for his best friend. For a bat seeking the rush, the Spiral's Edge had plenty of temptations to offer. While Ty didn't follow Hal around every waking moment, he kept an eye on him where he could. Trouble tended to follow Hal wherever he went. Hal's voice broke in on his thoughts. Ty, that girl's face. It didn't happen tonight. Those bruises are a few days old. Yeah, Ty nodded. Did she say anything? No, Hal replied, but someone hurt her. Then those guys tonight. Beryl noticed she's a techer from her node. Maybe she's looking for work, Ty said. Hal read him right away. We could ask her? Yeah, let's see how she's feeling in the morning. Ty got up and headed toward the door. Let me know if you need me for anything. Otherwise, I'll be in my quarters. Runa can monitor our jump. Okay, Cap. Get some sleep, yeah, Ty said. I'll do my best. I'll be giving away an ebook copy to one lucky winner, so please feel free to sign up for that giveaway.